unlawful employer hiring practices. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Morant. Now we'll have a round of 5 minutes questions from the senators, and I'll start. The first person who introduced me to the world of politics taught me something. He said, humility is the first casualty in politics. So I have followed that standard when it comes to bragging as often as possible about the fact that my mother was an immigrant to this country, and I'm damn proud of it. Her naturalization certificate sits behind my desk in the Capitol building as a reminder of who I am and where I come from, and my attitude about immigration. I cannot understand anyone, regardless of political affiliation, who takes the position, not one more immigrant. For God's sake, we are a nation of immigrants, and our strength is in immigration and diversity. The question is, should we have an orderly process or not? I think that's a legitimate question. The reason, of course, is to make sure that we have a process which people can respect, that cannot be overwhelmed, and at the same time understand that there are rules that have to be followed. When you take a look at the numbers of people who are showing up at our borders now, I have to go back to what Senator Graham said. They're mind-boggling. It is impossible to explain. I asked my staff to put together a list of the number of encounters of unaccompanied children by the Border Patrol since 2008. It's an incredible list, but the last 3 years are the most amazing revelations. In the year 2020, there were 19,657 unaccompanied children who were encountered at the border, 19,000. 2021, 140,000. 2022, 149,000. 2023, 131,000. The obvious question is, what changed and changed so dramatically during that period of time? It certainly wasn't the enactment of legislation by Congress. We've done nothing, virtually nothing, when it comes to policy changes in this country. But there is something going on, a force, an economic force, a demographic force, whatever it may be, that is pushing or pulling more and more people to our borders in numbers unprecedented. The obvious question is, should we do something about it? And can we do something that is balanced? Not the not one immigrant theory, and not the people who feel that the status quo is acceptable as it exists, but something in between that reflects our values and brings order to the border. Now, I think about these numbers in practical terms. I hope we all accept the premise of this hearing. Any child who shows up at our border deserves to be treated like a real human being and treated like a visitor to America and given protection and help in the areas when they're most vulnerable in their lives. I hope we all accept that premise. If you don't, I'm sorry. But I will tell you this, having accepted that premise, you have to ask whether the current system, designed long before we ran into these numbers, is adequate to the task. Where are these kids going? Where do these unaccompanied children go? What kind of families are they being sent to? How do they refer them? How do we follow up? How do we make sure that they're safe once they're there? The sheer numbers that I've given you here make it very difficult for me to understand how we can say we're going to keep up with this flow of people and maintain quality care for these kids. So I've given a long opening statement, which I hoped I would be able to avoid, but couldn't. But I'd like to start, if I could, with Mr. Salazar. You talked about the economic circumstances that create this. But those economic circumstances have been in the world for a long time. What has changed in the last 3 or 4 years?
Thank you, Chairman Durbin. These push factors, as you mentioned, the political stability, the poverty, the crime, violence, food scarcity, lack of medical care, climate change, all of these are against the backdrop of some even bigger numbers in the world. There are approximately 108 million people that are being forcibly displaced globally. And of that number of 108 million, roughly 20 million are in the Western Hemisphere. I mean, this is the definition of a challenge that no one country can face alone by itself. We have issues stemming from a long regime in Venezuela. We have issues stemming from the beginning of a regime in Nicaragua. We have issues in northern Central America also that are driving the families, the members of society there to make difficult choices for themselves and for their families and for their children to head north. We are attempting to tackle this diplomatically through regular engagement with these countries to try and address the issues at home. That is why Assistant Secretary Brian Nichols is actually in the region now. Yesterday he was in Guatemala, today he is in El Salvador.
I'm going to have to cut you off because I've run out of time.
I'm sorry, sir.
But I certainly give you time to respond on the record. But can someone address on the panel the fact that we offer services which we offered for many years, and now we have volumes and numbers of unaccompanied children which are breaking the system that make it very difficult for us to keep our promise? Would someone like to talk about the resources that are being dedicated to this, new resources to meet the challenge?
Thank you, Senator. As you mentioned in your opening, the importance of a trusted adult in these children's lives cannot be overstated. Children, we do our best. We have a thorough vetting process to release children to vetted sponsors, primarily close family members. But when and if those placements break down, having that trusted adult through post-release services or legal services. We have more children receiving those services than we've ever had, but we need to continue, and we need the support of Congress to do that. Because of unprecedented numbers in the refugee program, which both the refugee program and the unaccompanied children is one budget, we do have a request for $1.9 billion to be able to properly continue to expand and make sure that all children have these services.
Thanks, Ms. Marcos. Senator Graham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Count me in the camp that we